Well, as we said at the start, we are beginning this new series thinking about Easter as we are on the run up to Easter in a couple of weeks' time. And today we are thinking of how Jesus speaks of his sacrifice, which is to come. And if you have a Bible with you tonight, I encourage you to open it up to Mark chapter 10 and from verse 32 to 45, because that's what we're going to be focusing on throughout the course of this talk this evening. I'm not going to read it. We're going to kind of pick out bits as we go through, so we can follow the story along. But to begin with, I'm going to read verse 32. So Mark 10, the first part of verse 32. So Jesus and his disciples are on their way up to Jerusalem, with Jesus leading the way, and the disciples are astonished, while those who followed were afraid. So Jesus and his close friends are on their way to the city of Jerusalem. Now, I expect we have all in this room had our fair share of stressful journeys. When travel plans go wrong, when the children are playing up, when you break down, when your flight is delayed, when the train doesn't turn up. Well, this journey to Jerusalem was definitely on that list. Peaceful would not be a word that you'd use to describe it. The combination of Jesus' commitment to follow his Father's call and the growing confusion of his friends as they made their way to this place created a strong atmosphere of tension. As they got closer and closer to Jerusalem, a place they knew would be dangerous for Jesus to go, the disciples were astonished and others were afraid. It was all incredibly stressful. But in the midst of that stress, Jesus, we read, takes his friends to one side and he goes into greater detail than ever before about what is going to happen when he gets there. Let's keep reading from verse 32, second part. Again, he took the 12 aside and he told them what was going to happen to him. We're going up to Jerusalem, he said, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They'll condemn him to death, will hand him over to the Gentiles, who will mock him and spit on him, flog him and kill him. 3 days later, he will rise. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't imagine that this little chat did much to alleviate their fears. It probably wasn't the pep talk that these guys were hoping for. To people already astonished and afraid about the direction their journey was taking them, Jesus delivers a further blow. Instead of calming them down, it's going to be fine, we're going to get through this, it's not going to be as bad as you think when we get there. He confirms their fears. Guys, when we get into Jerusalem, you need to realize that I am going to be betrayed into the hands of the people that want me dead. They're going to then condemn me to death, hand me over to the Roman authorities who are known for their brutal murders, and then I'm going to be killed by them. Oh, and 3 days later, I'm going to rise from the dead. What on earth were they supposed to do with that? The one they'd given everything to follow, the one they were depending on to usher in a whole new kingdom, a whole new way of life, who was going to set them free from Roman rule, was on his way to die. Made no sense. And Jesus knew what was going to happen to him. He knew the cost, and yet he kept walking, putting one foot in front of the others, a little bit of ahead of his friends who were following behind. Every step he took, a sign, a visible sign of the prayer that he was to pray in the garden in a few days' time. Yet not my will, but your will be done. Because the thing is, that despite their astonishment and despite the fear of his friends, this was how it was always meant to be. This was exactly what these men who were astonished and feared would have known from the Old Testament scriptures. It's what they should have been expecting, but they weren't. in Isaiah chapter 53, a passage that they would have been familiar with. It falls within a section of Isaiah focusing on God's suffering servant, on the Messiah, on Jesus. We read these words. Isaiah chapter 53, verses 2-5. He grew up before him like a tender shoot and like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain. Like one from whom people hide their faces, he was despised and we held him in low esteem. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. Yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. And the punishment that brought us peace was on him. And by his wounds we are healed. You see, this was how it was always meant to be. Hundreds of years before Jesus was on that journey to Jerusalem with his friends, putting one foot in front of the other, Isaiah wrote these words. A plan was already in place. And it does seem crazy. This isn't how a king should rule. If you want to draw a crowd, get a following, make a name for yourself, the world would tell you that you need to be rich, influential, powerful. You've got to work your way up the ladder. But this isn't how Jesus did it. Instead, Jesus worked his way down. Again and again, choosing weakness and vulnerability, surrender and death. This is how the King of Kings chooses to rule. No wonder the disciples were astounded. Was he really the king? Had this been some horrendous mix-up? They'd spent the last 3 years following somebody who hadn't got a clue what they were doing. But Isaiah 53 doesn't end there. We read in verses 10 and 11, yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life an offering for sin, he will see his offspring and prolong his days, and the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. After he has suffered, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. Because you see, in God's upside-down kingdom, surrender and sacrifice are the steps to success. Far from being a tragedy, Jesus' death was a strategy by which he'd bring resurrection life to the world. This wasn't a defeat. The cross was Jesus' victory. His moment of greatest glory as he stands worldly power and fame on its head. And after Jesus has given them this little less than encouraging talk about what is going to happen to him as these disciples become more and more baffled, two of them, Zebedee's boys, sidle up to Jesus. Let's see what they say. Verses 35-37. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, come to him. Teacher, they said, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. What do you want me to do for you? He asked. And they replied, let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in glory. When Jesus asks what it is that they've got to say, I wonder what he thought they might say. I mean, he probably knew because he's God. But please don't go, Jesus. We're really worried what's going to happen. Let's go first and we'll scout things out for you and then hopefully make the situation a bit better for when you get there. Or even maybe they were to ask, give us the faith we need to endure the suffering and pain that you've just told us is going to happen. But no, this is not anything close to what Zebedee's boys say to Jesus that day. Let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in glory. It's utterly astounding after everything Jesus has just said. It's like his message has gone in one ear and out the other. The timing could not have been worse. I expect we've all been in situations where we or somebody around us has put their foot in it. A misplaced joke, the wrong thing said at the wrong time, an unfortunate sequence of events where the timing is less than perfect. I think one of the prime examples I have of this was when I was on my selection conference for ordination. And we'd gone to this place down in Ely, and we were there, and basically you're being monitored, assessed from the second you arrive and registrate at the registration desk until you leave. And the only exceptions are when you're sleeping, because that would be weird, and when you are you're being watched while you're eating, when you're in worship, when you're in chapel. But even that, I'm pretty sure if you decide not to go to chapel, they're probably going to be making notes. But anyway, so you're being monitored the whole time. First meal comes round. Everybody's sitting there and you're all sitting around your tables eating your dinner. And there's the assessors. There's like these people kind of, and you know who they are because they've got lanyards on saying assessors, so it's no surprise. And you know you're being watched. And you get your food and you sit down at the table and it's all very bizarre. And we're all ready to, the room has gone quiet. One of the assessors is about to say grace. And then this guy walks in who was obviously incredibly nervous from the second that he arrived, walked into the silent dining room, saw that everybody was quiet, saw that he was obviously late, not a great start to his selection conference, swears really loudly, and then goes bright red and walks to his table, and the assessors are kind of tutting and everybody's like, oh my goodness, he might as well go home now. I've never seen him again. I don't know what happened to him. But anyway, there we go. Maybe he got through. But it was absolutely hilarious. You know, these guys were under immense pressure, probably a bit like that poor bloke on his selection panel. And when we're under pressure, we make decisions that perhaps aren't always ideal. Perhaps the timing isn't always perfect. And for these guys, the pressure was clearly getting to them. Whilst Jesus was teaching about surrender and sacrifice, these two were jostling for top dog. They wanted to turn Jesus' journey to Jerusalem into a march of glory, a glory in which they, who they believed were the elite of the elite, the closest friends of Jesus, will sit either side of him as he reigns as king. They wanted to be famous, pure and simple. But this is what Jesus has to say to them in verses 38 to 40. You don't know what you're asking, he says. Can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with? We can, they answered. And Jesus said to them, you will drink the cup I drink and you will be baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with. But to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared. And the cup that Jesus is speaking of here is a metaphor for suffering. And it's something he says again in the Garden of Gethsemane as he cries out, take this cup from me. And baptism is a metaphor of going into the depths. Jesus isn't going to be sprinkled with a little bit of suffering. He's going to be plunged into it. And the question he has for them is, will you come too? And James and John think that they can. They're self-confident in their own abilities, believing that they can endure a little bit of hardship, a few trials, if it means that they'll get the gifts and privileges of sitting at Jesus' right and left. If it helps them to assert power over others, then they'll take a little bit of suffering. Perhaps they even understood the cup Jesus was talking about to be a cup of victory. And Jesus confirms their confidence. He assures them that, yes, you're going to suffer. You are going to drink from the cup I drink from. You are going to be baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with. You're going to go to the depths. You are going to suffer. But the seating arrangements in my Father's kingdom, I'm afraid I can't say anything. These places belong to those for whom they've been prepared, says Jesus. And we can read this little interaction and this little episode with James and John, and we can think, what Wallies? What on earth were they doing? As if you would say to Jesus, as he's marching to his death, oh, by the way, we want to come and sit next to you in glory. It all doesn't make any sense. But actually, maybe if we actually stop and think about it, we're not that far from them. Yes, maybe we're not jostling for the kind of seats in God's kingdom. But by much more subtle behavior, I think we can show how little we grasp of what it means to be disciples of a crucified king who gave his life as a ransom for many. Instead of going low, we try and jostle for top dog. Instead of letting others go first, we can have a tendency to put ourselves forward. Instead of surrender, we get caught up in the slipstream of society's striving, forgetting that we are the very ones that Jesus came to save. Pride and power can so easily, in big ways and in little ways, come before surrender and sacrifice. Now, maybe, well, clearly we do because we're here tonight. We come to church, we pray, we read our Bibles. But are we willing to withhold our pride and our ambition and go low, surrendering to the pattern of the one who's gone to the depths, who surrendered it all for us? Are there areas in our lives where we are scared of putting others first, of surrender for fear of what the cost might be? In response to James and John's outrageous audacity, the other disciples are absolutely fuming. And it's probably not actually because they are outraged by their insensitivity after everything Jesus has said. It's probably because actually they wanted to have those seats and they got in there first. But Jesus' response to this tension that is growing amongst the ranks is to gather them together once again. And this is where we finish our passage in verses 42 to 45. Jesus calls them together, we read, and he says, "You know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man didn't come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." I think it's amazing here. Jesus isn't saying it's not a good thing to be great, but he's redefining what that greatness means. The disciples have taken their model of leadership from the world, whereas Jesus wants them to take it from him, and maybe we need to hear that too. Maybe tonight we need to take our model of leadership and what greatness means, not from the world and what everyone else is doing, but from Jesus and the pattern and the model that he sets for us to follow. The way of the world is so often to strive for more, to push ourselves forward. We don't have to look far to see that I is so often at the center. My iPhone, my iPad, my rights, I'm furthering myself. We Instagram our lives in an attempt to prove that we are worthy, to show the world that our lives are sorted, that we're okay, that we're doing well. I wonder if anybody has watched or is watching The Apprentice at the moment. This show is packed full of people trying to prove themselves, promote themselves, and push themselves forward. And most of the time at the expense of their teammates. And it's into this kind of culture, I know this is a very exaggerated form of it, but it's into this me, I-centered culture that Jesus' pattern stands out, beating out a new rhythm, a new way of doing things, a new way of seeing the world. Whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. Jesus radically defined greatness. It's an alien concept to these apprentice contestants, but maybe less alien to the contestants of this show. I wonder if anybody has seen this. The Beast Games, Mr. Beast, Jimmy Donaldson, one of the most famous YouTubers in the world. And because it's America, you don't win hundreds of thousands of pounds, like you might on The Apprentice or other shows, but $10 million. And we're going to watch a little bit of an episode in a moment where we see 4 teams of 50 people, and each team has to elect one person who's going to represent them, who they think that they can trust. And so 4 leaders are called onto a stage with a buzzer each in front of them. And this counter of money, real money, is going up. And if at any point they press that button, they get to go home with all that money. But the cost of that is that they stay in, they get all the money, but their whole team are out. Let's have a look at this clip. Wow. They don't take it. $1 million on the table. But it's that none of them press for it. And one of those guys you might have heard at the end, Jeremy, is a Christian, and when asked why he didn't take it, he says, "My integrity is not up for sale. My integrity is not up for sale." It's utterly staggering, but it's a teeny tiny and obviously very flawed in lots of other ways, but there we go, glimpse of the sacrificial leadership that is demonstrated by Jesus, except he didn't just give up winning $1 million. He didn't end on 0, but he emptied himself completely, going to the very depths so he could bring this broken, prideful, pain-filled world back up to new resurrection life. I love how C.S. Lewis puts it. He writes, "In the Christian story, God descends to reascend. He comes down from the heights of absolute being into time and space, down into humanity, down further still, if embryologists are right, to recapitulate in the womb ancient and pre-human phases of life, go into the very roots and seabed of the nature he created. But he goes down to come up again and bring the whole ruined world up with him." There is nothing that Jesus Christ has not redeemed and made new. There is nothing that we face that he is unable to deal with, because as he descended to the depths, he went to the lowest of the low so that he might bring everything up with him to resurrection life. And as we put our trust in him, we get to share in that remarkable victory because of his sacrifice, because of his lowering himself. We are victorious. We are more than conquerors. How do we respond to that? Well, I'll just finish on 2 things. I think firstly, we've got to receive what he's done. We've got to receive the freedom that his sacrifice has won for us. We're free because of his sacrifice to live authentically and vulnerably. No longer do we need to be people who strive for more. We don't have to live to be the best or to look good. We don't have to worry what other people think of us, because our identity isn't found in our achievements. Our identity isn't found in what others think or in being the best or in reaching the top. It's not in our work. It's not in what we do. It's not in our income, what our house looks like. It's not in how big our friendship group is, how popular we are. It's not in how big our church is. But it's in Jesus. Our identity is in Jesus, who has given everything, who's given up every title, accolade, and status this world could offer, so that we, each of us, might be given a name that is above any other name we could be given. Sons and daughters of the living God. And that is what If we choose to put our trust in Christ, we are tonight. We are sons and we are daughters of the King of Kings. That is what his sacrifice has won for us. How amazing. How remarkable. We can't get better than that. No promotion will earn us that title. And when we truly grasp hold of that, it doesn't matter when people see our weakness or our fears or our vulnerabilities, because it's not what makes us successful. In 1 John 3, we read these amazing words. How great is the love the Father has lavished on us that we should be called children of God. And that is what we are. That is what we are tonight. Let's receive the freedom he's won for us. And maybe as we've been talking about solitude, maybe when you go into solitude this week, when you find time to spend with the Lord Jesus, ask him to imprint those verses, that word on your heart that you are a son, you are a daughter of God. So let's receive the freedom that his sacrifice has won for us. And then as freed people, let's follow his example. In light of all he has done, we can live a life that frees others, a life of self-giving service, not one that's all about meeting our own material needs, or that feeds selfishness and breeds competition. If the one we follow has given his life for us, then can't we give our lives for other people? As we've already seen, our world is full of James and Johns, of go-getters, of status seekers, of glory hunters, and we can definitely join with them. But we're invited onto a different path tonight. One that, like Jesus' journey to Jerusalem, will leave some around us astounded. But as we follow Jesus, we can set ourselves the challenge of using whatever social capital we have to draw in the marginalized, to give significance and worth to those around us rather than claiming it all for ourselves. I remember years ago when just seeing some of those images from South Sudan really reminded me of a time when we were in Zambia giving out meals to children. And it was a Friday, it was the end of the week, and they got a hot meal from the church we were working with. And they were coming forward for their food, but it was just for the children that were kind of in that school. And one of the little siblings of one of the boys had turned up and wanted a meal, obviously, because there wasn't any food at home. And this little chap, he got his meal, and I remember just watching as he gave what he had to his sister so she could have a meal. He had nothing, and he gave it so that she might eat too. It's utterly amazing. And that image, that surrender, that sacrifice, knowing that he wouldn't get probably another hot meal till Monday, was remarkable. I spent a lot of time chatting with parents of small children. And every day is, when I'm chatting to my wonderful friends as they're looking after their little ones, I'm just struck by the surrender and the sacrifice that is going on in that whole parenting little people thing. And maybe for some of us here, that is our reality at the moment. It's hidden, it's unseen, it's unglamorous, but the Lord sees and he knows. And there are so many different examples in this room, which if we were talking to each other, we'd be able to name. And maybe we can talk about that and share that in our life groups this week. Those things that delight the heart of Jesus as we give of ourselves, as we surrender, as we follow his path to greatness. We can do that in small ways and in big ways. But the question I want to finish on tonight really is what is holding us back? What are we holding on to? Where are we seeking to live for ourselves? Where are we caught up in the slipstream of society's striving? This evening, Jesus is inviting us to let go, to surrender all that we are afresh to him, to let him be the one who shapes our identity, and from that place of freedom, living to set others free as we follow his example. And as we do that, we don't need to be afraid. We can trust him, though others around us might be astounded and afraid like Jesus' friends were. We can trust our good shepherd, that he's not going to knock us down. He's not going to destroy us. The fruit that comes from surrender will be better. In Galatians 2, Paul writes, I've been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loves me and gave himself for me. As we lay down our lives, as we die to ourselves, we die in hope. The hope that in exchange for our death, God breathes into us his eternal life that transforms us and that will transform the world around us.